My name is Clara Wallace. For the past 6 years, I've been the lead archivist at the University Library in Savannah, Georgia, a city where the past breathes as heavily as the humid summer air. I live a life measured in the scent of old paper and the quiet satisfaction of preserving stories. It's a peaceful existence, one I chose deliberately after a youth spent moving from one bustling city to another. My own family is small and scattered, a constellation of loving but distant stars. So when I married Leo, I didn't just gain a husband. I felt I had finally found my anchor, my true north, in his family. At the heart of that family was his mother, Eleanor. Her home, a beautiful two-story house with a sprawling veranda in the Ardsley Park neighborhood, was our sanctuary. It was painted a soft, buttery yellow, framed by ancient oaks dripping with Spanish moss, their branches like gnarled, welcoming arms. On the last Sunday of every month, that house would come alive. It was a ritual as sacred and comforting as any I had ever known. "Clara, darling, could you give me a hand with the salad spinner? My arthritis is acting up today." Eleanor's voice, warm and melodious like wind chimes, would drift from the kitchen. I'd smile and leave my post on the porch swing where I'd been reading. Eleanor was a retired literature professor, and her home was a testament to a life lived among books. Shelves overflowed in every room, not as trophies, but as well-loved friends, their spines softened with use. Though she was in her late 60s, she moved with a quiet elegance that defied her years. Her silver hair was always swept up in a loose, graceful bun, and she favored simple linen dresses that seemed to float around her as she worked. She had welcomed me into her heart from the moment Leo introduced us, seeing not a stranger, but a kindred spirit who loved books and her son in equal measure. "Leo, are the place settings done?" she'd call out, her tone gentle but firm. "Just about, Mom," his voice would echo back from the formal dining room. Leo, an architect with a local firm, had his mother's thoughtful nature and a quiet strength that I had fallen in love with. He was tall and lean, with kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. He adored his mother, a devotion that was both touching and completely understandable. He had chosen his career path here, in his hometown, largely to remain close to her after his father passed away more than a decade ago. Our own small cottage was a mere 10-minute drive from her door. The heavy oak front door would swing open, and a whirlwind of energy would enter. "I'm here." Sorry, the traffic from the islands was a nightmare. Sophie, Leo's younger sister, would breeze in, dropping a designer handbag onto the hall table. She worked as a social media manager for a boutique marketing firm, a job that seemed to consist of making life look effortlessly glamorous online. 3 years prior, a messy and public divorce had sent her retreating back to the safety of her childhood home, and she'd been living with Eleanor ever since. "Sophie, welcome back," I'd say, giving her a hug that she'd return with a brief, fragrant squeeze. She always smelled of expensive perfume and looked as though she'd just stepped out of a magazine, even when she claimed to be exhausted. "Weekends are the worst," she'd sigh, pulling a bottle of chilled rose from her tote bag. "But the engagement metrics on the new campaign are through the roof. The client is ecstatic, so I'm hoping for a hefty bonus." Sophie rarely spoke of her ex-husband, but the family understood the split was due to significant financial indiscretions. Since her return, she had seemed to dote on Eleanor, a constant presence in the house that their mother appeared to cherish. "Everyone, come and sit," Eleanor would announce, carrying in a platter of her famous shrimp and grits, the steam rising in a fragrant cloud. "I use the stone-ground grits you love so much, Leo." We would gather around the polished mahogany table, the four of us, a portrait of familial harmony that had remained constant for the 5 years of my marriage. Eleanor's cooking was an art form, each dish a story. When I asked for her recipes, she would just pat my hand and laugh. "Oh, it's just a bit of this and a feeling for that, my dear. The real secret is cooking with love." "It's divine, Eleanor, as always," I'd say, savoring a mouthful. "I hope one day I can create a tradition like this for my own family." Eleanor's eyes would soften. "Clara, you already have. Leo is always telling me what a warm and wonderful home you've made for him." Leo would blush slightly. "Mom, you don't have to broadcast our conversations." He'd catch my eye and wink. But she's right. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. Sophie would raise her wine glass. A toast. To Mom's incredible cooking, to Clara's quiet genius with dusty old books, and to Leo's new city park commission. Leo had recently won a prestigious contract to design a new public space along the riverfront. As our glasses clinked, a familiar wave of gratitude washed over me. My own parents, living in Oregon, were a loving but distant presence in my life. Here, in this sun-drenched Savannah dining room, I felt truly rooted, truly home. As we ate, Sophie would recount tales from the vibrant, fast-paced world of digital marketing, talking about influencers and brand deals with a casualness that always felt slightly foreign to me. It's a different world, Eleanor would say, looking at her daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. Just don't wear yourself out, sweetheart. I'm fine, Mom. It's what you have to do to get ahead, Sophie would reply, a flicker of something impatience, perhaps, in her eyes before it was replaced by a bright smile. Leo would talk about the challenges of his park design, balancing historical preservation with modern needs. We would listen, offering encouragement, our little circle a bastion of mutual support. For dessert, Eleanor would bring out her specialty, a peach cobbler made with fruit from the farmer's market, its sugary crust perfectly browned. I know this is your favorite, Clara. It is, I'd say, my heart swelling. Honestly, some days at the library, when I'm dealing with a particularly difficult research request, the thought of this cobbler gets me through. Her smile was my reward, a beacon of simple, unconditional affection. It was in these small moments of being seen and cherished that the bonds of our family were forged and strengthened. After the meal, we'd retire to the living room, surrounded by books and the soft glow of lamps, sharing stories and sipping decaf coffee until the sky outside turned a deep indigo. When it was time for us to leave, Eleanor would walk us to the door, hugging us both tightly. Drive safe, you too. I'll see you next week for our Tuesday coffee. In the car on the way home, I'd lean my head against the passenger window, the scent of jasmine from the neighborhood gardens drifting in. Your mother is such a gift, Leo. We are so incredibly lucky. I know, he'd say, his hand finding mine in the darkness. She's the best of us. It was a Monday morning, just before dawn. I had woken early, a habit ingrained from years of enjoying the quietest part of the day. I was sitting in our small sunroom, nursing a cup of tea and watching the sky blush from gray to pink when my phone buzzed violently on the wicker table beside me. The screen illuminated with Sophie's name. A call at 5:45 a.m. could only mean one thing. A cold dread, slick and immediate, washed over me. Sophie? What is it? I answered, my voice already tight with apprehension. Her voice on the other end was a fractured, gasping sob. Clara, it's Mom. Something's happened to Mom. She collapsed. The teacup slipped from my fingers, shattering on the slate floor. The sound was distant, unreal. What? What do you mean collapsed? The ambulance is here. We're going to Candler Hospital. Please, just come. Now. Her words were punctuated by a wail of pure panic. My librarian's calm, the practiced composure I relied on, evaporated. I became pure motion, my mind racing to catch up with my body. Sophie, listen to me. Was she conscious? What were her symptoms? I went into her room this morning. She was on the floor beside her bed. She wouldn't wake up, Clara. The paramedics. There. Her voice broke completely. We're on our way, I said, already shaking Leo awake. I'll be there as fast as I can. I hung up and turned to my husband, who was blinking in confusion. Leo, wake up. It's your mother. She collapsed. We have to get to the hospital. The confusion on his face morphed into stark terror. He was out of bed in an instant, pulling on clothes, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. Mom? But we just saw her. She was fine. I don't know any details, Leo. Sophie called. They're at Candler. The drive, usually a short 15 minutes, felt like an eternity. The early morning traffic of Savannah, usually a slow, genteel crawl, felt like a deliberate, malicious obstacle. Leo gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. This has to be a mistake, he murmured, his voice hollow. She was so vibrant yesterday. I reached across the console and placed my hand on his arm, though my own hand was trembling. Eleanor is strong, Leo. We have to believe she'll be all right. But a cold knot of fear was tightening in my stomach. I had seen enough of life to know how fragile its thread could be. When we burst through the automatic doors of the emergency room, we found Sophie huddled in a plastic chair, her face a mess of smeared makeup and tears. She looked small and broken. Sophie. I rushed to her side, and she launched herself into my arms, burying her face in my shoulder. They won't tell me anything, Clara, she sobbed. Just that it's critical. Leo went to the admissions desk, his voice strained as he asked for news of Eleanor Wallace. A few minutes later, a doctor with weary eyes and a grim set to his mouth approached us. The white of his coat seemed unnaturally bright against the muted tones of the waiting room. Are you Mrs. Wallace's family? He asked, his voice low and compassionate. Perhaps we should sit down. Those words. I knew what they meant. In movies, it's a dramatic moment. In reality, it's a quiet, devastating blow, a sentence that cleaves your life into a before and an after. Leo seemed to understand, too. He sagged into the chair beside me, his face ashen. I am so very sorry, the doctor said, his gaze meeting each of ours in turn. Mrs. Eleanor Wallace passed away at 6:52 a.m. We believe it was a sudden, massive coronary event. Sophie let out a sound that wasn't a cry, but a raw, wounded howl. No, you're lying. That's impossible. She was fine. The world tilted on its axis. Time seemed to stretch and thin, sounds becoming distorted. Eleanor. Gone. The buttery yellow house, the scent of old books, the warmth of her smile, all relegated to memory in the space of a single heartbeat. The doctor continued gently, his words a clinical balm on a gaping wound. It would have been very fast. It's likely she was gone before she even knew what was happening. We believe she felt very little pain. I felt a strange detachment, my mind trying to process the unthinkable. I suppressed my own rising tide of grief, trying to be the anchor for Leo and Sophie. Can we see her? I asked, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. Of course, the doctor said. A nurse will take you back shortly. There is some paperwork we need to attend to first. The hours that followed were a blur of sterile corridors, hushed voices, and the rustle of forms being signed. We had to make calls, to deliver the devastating news to Eleanor's sister in Florida, to distant cousins. Sophie was too shattered to be practical, her grief a storm. It was I who spoke to the funeral director, my voice steady even as my heart felt like it was splintering into 1,000 pieces. I want the service to be filled with white camellias, Sophie said between sobs, later that afternoon. We were back at Eleanor's house, the silence of the place a physical weight. Mom always said they were the most elegant flower. That's a beautiful idea, Sophie, I said softly. She would love that. There was so much to do. Notifying the university where she'd taught for 30 years, arranging for an obituary, choosing a casket. Leo moved like a ghost through his childhood home, his shock a palpable shroud. Together, Sophie and I began to piece together the logistics of a farewell. Let's hold the funeral on Thursday afternoon, the funeral director suggested. Mrs. Wallace was a well-respected member of the community. I expect many people will want to pay their respects. Sophie, in a surprising moment of clarity, began to plan the details with a fierce determination. She loved classical music. We should have a string quartet play Bach. And I want to print copies of her favorite poem, Do Not Stand at My Grave and Weep, to give to everyone. I was touched by her focus. It was a loving tribute, a way to channel her pain into something beautiful that would honor Eleanor's spirit. That evening, the three of us sat in Eleanor's living room, a half-empty bottle of wine on the coffee table between us. The house felt wrong without her, hollowed out. In the kitchen, the dishes from our Sunday dinner were still in the dishwasher, a poignant reminder of a life so suddenly extinguished. I can still smell her perfume in here, Sophie whispered, tears tracing fresh paths down her cheeks. That light, rosewater scent she always wore. Leo had gone into his mother's bedroom and just sat on the edge of her bed, his head in his hands. I went in and put a hand on his shoulder. The doctor said she didn't suffer, Leo. I hope not, he said, his voice thick. She deserved a peaceful end. We spent the night poring over photo albums, each picture a fresh stab of pain and love. Eleanor at our wedding, her eyes shining. Eleanor holding a newborn Sophie, a look of profound wonder on her face. Eleanor and Leo on a beach, laughing into the wind. She was so devoted to us, Sophie said, tracing a finger over a picture of Eleanor reading a storybook to her. When my marriage fell apart, she just opened her arms and her home, no questions asked. She was the best mother, Leo agreed, his voice choked with emotion. I could have the worst day at the firm, and one phone call with her would make everything seem manageable again. I shared my own memories, my voice soft. I'll never forget the first time I came here for Sunday dinner. I was so nervous. She took me aside in the kitchen and said, "You're not a guest, Clara. You're family now." It was one of the kindest things anyone has ever said to me. The night before the funeral, we finalized the last of the arrangements. We had worked as a team, united in our grief. So many people have called, Sophie said, looking at a long list of names. Her old students, neighbors, her book club. She was so loved. Leo and I nodded. Eleanor had woven a rich tapestry of relationships throughout her life. The funeral would be a testament to the love she had given and received. Let's give her the most beautiful send-off we can, I said, looking at them both. A farewell that's as full of grace and love as she was. We joined hands, the three of us, a small, grieving triangle in the silent, book-lined room. Thursday morning arrived, gray and overcast, the sky a mirror of my mood. I stood before my closet, the black silk of my dress cool against my skin. I hadn't slept. I'd spent the night replaying our last dinner, searching for a sign, a clue that it would be our last. There was nothing. Just laughter, and love, and the taste of peach cobbler. Leo, are you ready? I called from the bedroom. We were due at the funeral home in an hour to receive family. His reply came from the living room, strangely muted. Almost. I sat at my vanity, applying a touch of concealer under my eyes, trying to erase the evidence of a sleepless night. My mind was a checklist of the day's sorrowful logistics. Arrive at 11 a.m., greet mourners, the service at 2 p.m., followed by the burial. A small, private dinner for the immediate family afterwards. It was going to be an impossibly long day. Clara. Leo's voice was right behind me, quiet and heavy. I'm not going. I froze, my lipstick halfway to my lips. I met his eyes in the mirror. What did you say? I'm not going to Mom's funeral, he repeated, his tone flat, devoid of emotion. He was dressed in slacks and a simple polo shirt, not the dark suit laid out on our bed. I spun around on the vanity stool. What are you talking about? Leo, it's your mother's funeral. It's our final goodbye. My voice was a mixture of disbelief and concern. I know what it is, he said, his gaze fixed on a point somewhere over my shoulder. And I'm not going. This is the shock talking, I said, rising and going to him, trying to keep my voice gentle. You're not thinking straight. But we have to go, Leo. For Eleanor. For Sophie. Everyone will be waiting for you. He finally looked at me then, and his eyes held an intensity that startled me. It wasn't grief. It was something else. Something harder. I need you to stay home with me, he said. Just trust me. Trust you? About what? My patience was fraying. Leo, you have to give me a reason. You were helping plan this just last night. What changed? I can't explain it right now, he said, turning away to stare out the window. But please, Clara. Stay here today. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. This wasn't my Leo. My Leo was steady, rational. This was someone I didn't recognize. What am I supposed to tell Sophie? That her brother, who adored their mother, has decided to skip her funeral for no reason. Tell her I'm sick, he said, his voice low. A sudden fever. Anything. Just make a plausible excuse. You want me to lie? I stood and walked toward him, my voice rising. Leo, what is going on? What happened between last night and this morning? He turned and gripped my shoulders, his hands surprisingly strong. Clara, please. I know this sounds insane. But I am begging you to trust me. You cannot leave this house today. It's not safe. Not safe. The words hung in the air between us. I looked deep into his eyes and saw it then, a flicker of raw, primal fear. He knew something. Something terrible. Does this have to do with your mother's death? I whispered. He hesitated, a muscle twitching in his jaw. It might. That single admission shifted everything. My anger dissolved into a cold, creeping anxiety. What do you mean, it might? I'll explain everything later. I promise, he said. Right now, I just need you to trust me. My cell phone rang, shrill and demanding. It was Sophie. I looked at Leo, my mind a whirlwind of confusion, and answered. Clara, are you on your way? Aunt Carol is already here and… I took a deep breath, the life feeling like ash in my mouth. Sophie, I'm so sorry. Leo's come down with a terrible fever. He's really sick. What? Is he okay? Her voice was laced with concern and frustration. I don't think it's serious, but he can't get out of bed. I'm so sorry. I need to stay and look after him. But, today of all days, she lamented. I can't do this alone. You're not alone, I said, my chest aching with the deceit. Everyone is there for you. We'll come to the cemetery as soon as he's better, I promise. After I hung up, a wave of self-loathing washed over me. But one look at Leo's grim, resolute face told me this was no mere whim. I was tethered to him by a trust built over years of love and partnership. I had to believe in him. I took off the black dress and pulled on a pair of comfortable jeans. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, marking the minutes to a funeral we would not attend. At 11 a.m., when the first mourners would be arriving, Leo was pacing the living room, peering through the slats of the blinds. I made tea, my hands shaking slightly, 1,000 terrifying scenarios playing out in my head. Just after 1:30 p.m., with the service due to begin in half an hour, my phone rang again. It was Sophie, her voice strained. Clara, are you sure Leo can't come? Even just for the service? People are asking for him. I'm so sorry, Sophie. He's really not well, I repeated, the lie growing heavier with each telling. We're thinking of you. Hanging up, I felt a profound sense of guilt. What would Eleanor think of this chaos, this deception on the day of her farewell? At precisely 2 p.m., the time the service was scheduled to start, Leo suddenly went still, his attention fixed on the street outside. Leo, for God's sake, what are you? The doorbell rang. One sharp, clean chime. We both froze. It rang again, then a third time, insistent and impatient. Who could that be? I whispered, starting to get up. Leo shot a hand out to stop me, his voice a low, urgent command. Don't. Do not open that door. Go look through the peephole, but whatever you see, do not open it. My heart began to pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I crept to the front door, my breath held tight in my chest. I pressed my eye to the small glass lens. A man stood on our porch. He was large and thick-set, wearing an ill-fitting black suit. His hair was shaved close to his scalp, and his eyes were small and hard. In his left hand, he held a black duffel bag. He didn't look like a mourner or a delivery person. He looked dangerous. Leo, I breathed, stumbling back from the door. There's a man in a suit. He has a bag. Leo's face went pale. I was afraid of this. Who is he? What does he want? The doorbell rang again, longer this time. The man wasn't going away. Do you know him, Leo? But Leo was already on his phone, his fingers flying across the screen as he dialed 911. Yes, I need to report a potential home invasion, he said, his voice miraculously calm. He gave our address. The man is at my front door. He may be armed. I believe my wife and I are in danger. In danger. The words echoed in the sudden, ringing silence of my mind. This was real. This was happening. Leo, you said this was about your mother, I whispered, my voice trembling. What is this? We heard footsteps on the porch, then on the gravel path alongside the house. The man was circling, checking the windows. Clara, get away from the windows, Leo ordered, pulling me back. Go upstairs. Lock yourself in the bedroom. What about you? I'm waiting for the police. He peeked through a tiny gap in the curtains. My mother, she didn't just die, Clara. And now I think they've come for us. In that moment, the foundation of my world crumbled. Eleanor's death wasn't a tragedy. It was something else. And we were next. From the distance, I heard the faint, rising wail of a siren. The man outside must have heard it too, because we heard his footsteps quicken on the gravel. "Go, Clara." "No," Leo yelled. I ran up the stairs, my heart screaming, a silent, terrified shriek. Why was this happening? What had Eleanor gotten involved in? The sirens grew louder, closer, a sound that should have been a comfort, but now only amplified the terror. I locked the bedroom door and slid to the floor, my back against it, listening to the sounds of my life unraveling. From the second-floor window, I watched as two police cruisers screeched to a halt in front of our house, their blue and red lights painting chaotic patterns on the neighboring homes. An officer spotted the man in the black suit as he tried to slip around the back of the house toward the wooded area. "Police. Stop. Hands where I can see them." The man froze, then slowly raised his hands in surrender. He was cuffed and put on the ground without a struggle, his face a mask of cold indifference. One of the officers carefully took the black duffel bag and opened it. Even from my vantage point, I saw the metallic glint of what was pulled from inside. A gun. My legs felt like water as I stumbled back down the stairs. Leo had opened the front door and was speaking with a detective, a gray-haired man with kind, tired eyes. "Mr. Wallace," the detective was saying, his expression grave, "this man you called about is a known contract killer. We found a silenced handgun in his bag. We also found these." He held up a clear evidence bag containing several photographs. My blood ran cold. They were pictures of Leo and me, taken from a distance. One was of us leaving the grocery store last week. Another was of me watering the plants on our porch. We had been watched. Stalked. "Why?" I asked, my voice a broken whisper. "Why would anyone want to kill us?" Leo took a deep, shuddering breath and walked to the bookshelf in our living room. He pulled out a worn, leather-bound copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, Eleanor's favorite, a first edition she had treasured. He opened it and carefully removed a folded piece of paper tucked inside. "I need you to read this," he said, handing the letter to the detective. I read it over the detective's shoulder, my eyes scanning Eleanor's familiar, elegant script. "My dearest Leo, if you are reading this, then something has happened to me, and I fear it was not by nature's hand. For a few weeks now, I have felt unwell, a strange weakness in my limbs, a fluttering in my chest. At first, I dismissed it as age. But I have seen Sophie adding something to my evening tea. A fine, white powder from a small vial she keeps hidden. I confronted her and she laughed it off, said it was a new herbal sleep aid. But my intuition, the one that has guided me my whole life, tells me something is deeply wrong. I have no proof, only a mother's dreadful suspicion. I cannot bear to accuse my own daughter without certainty. But I am afraid. If I should die suddenly, I beg you, do not attend my funeral. I fear it would be a trap. She has spoken of money troubles, of feeling resentful. I fear what that resentment might breed. Please protect yourself and your wonderful Clara. You are my world. All my love, forever. Mom." A choked sob escaped my lips and I sank onto the arm of the sofa. "Sophie. Our Sophie. It was unthinkable. When did you get this?" the detective asked Leo, his voice sharp. "She gave me the book last week," Leo said, his voice heavy with pain. "She said she wanted me to have it. I didn't find the letter until the night she died. At first, I thought she must have been confused, paranoid. But the warning, it was so specific. I couldn't risk it. Why didn't you come to us sooner?" "With what?" Leo asked, his voice cracking. "A letter? A mother's suspicion about her own daughter? I'd be accusing my sister of murder based on a feeling. But when Mom died, exactly as she feared she might, I knew I had to take the warning seriously." The detective pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the medical examiner. We're going to run a full toxicology screen on Mrs. Wallace's remains." Just then, another officer entered. Detective Mills, the suspect's talking. "His name is Alaric Kane. He says he was hired by Jessica Thompson's sister, Sophie, to stage an accident at the funeral home today." My mind reeled. An accident at the funeral. The detective elaborated, piecing together the confession. The plan was to cause a large lighting rig to fall during the eulogy. If you and your wife were killed, all of your mother's assets would pass directly to your sister, the sole surviving heir. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Sophie had been slowly poisoning her mother. Then, she'd planned to eliminate us to inherit everything. How much money are we talking about? I heard myself ask, the question sounding obscene. Your mother's estate, the house, investments, life insurance, is valued at approximately $850,000, the detective replied grimly. We also ran a preliminary financial check on Sophie Wallace. She has over $150,000 in credit card debt and personal loans. Leo buried his face in his hands. My own sister, for money. A call came through on the detective's radio. The toxicology report was back, expedited. Eleanor's system contained significant levels of digoxin, a concentrated derivative of the foxglove plant, a plant I now remembered seeing in her garden. Administered in small, steady doses, it mimics the symptoms of congestive heart failure. In a final, larger dose, it triggers a fatal cardiac event. Your mother knew, I said, tears streaming down my face. She knew she was being poisoned, but she couldn't bring herself to believe it. She loved her daughter, even as that daughter was killing her. The detectives were dispatched to the funeral home. Leo and I were left in the sudden, echoing quiet of our home, the world irrevocably altered. Leo, if you hadn't listened to her, I whispered, trembling. We'd be gone, he finished, his voice hollow. Just like her. An hour later, Detective Mills called. They had arrested Sophie at the funeral reception. He said she didn't go quietly. When she saw the police, she had started screaming, not in fear, but in rage. Why are you here? They should be dead. Why aren't they dead? Her public breakdown in front of all the mourners had been a horrifying spectacle. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, the detective said, his voice full of sympathy. But the attendees, they understand now. They're seeing your mother's final act for what it was, an act of love to save her son. That night, Leo and I sat in silence, Eleanor's photograph on the mantelpiece seeming to watch over us. She saved us, Leo said, his eyes fixed on her smiling face. She protected us from beyond the grave. Her love had been a shield. Her final words, a warning whispered from the precipice, had been our salvation. The grief was still a raw, open wound, but now it was intertwined with a profound, staggering gratitude. Eleanor's love had been stronger than Sophie's greed. It had been stronger than death itself. 6 months passed, a blur of legal proceedings and quiet healing. Sophie's trial was swift. The evidence, the hitman's testimony, her financial records, and traces of the poison found in her room, was overwhelming. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. We saw her one last time in court. Her eyes, when they met ours, were not filled with remorse, but with a cold, bottomless resentment. It should have been mine, she spat at Leo. Mom always loved you more. In that moment, I understood. It had never been about love for Sophie. It had been about possession. We spent a long weekend clearing out Eleanor's house, the buttery yellow walls now holding more sorrow than joy. Each object told a story, and we sorted through them with gentle hands, deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to let go. In the back of her closet, tucked away in a hat box, Leo found a small, cloth-bound journal. The cover simply said, "My Garden of Thoughts." We sat on the floor and read it together, Eleanor's voice seeming to rise from the pages. October 12th, I am so worried about Sophie. She puts on such a brave face, but I see the panic in her eyes when the mail comes. I offered to help with her finances, but she became so angry, so defensive. I don't want to push her away. I can only love her and hope she finds her way back to the light. November 3rd, such a lovely dinner with Leo and Clara. Seeing them together, their quiet, steady love for one another, fills my heart with peace. They are building such a beautiful life. If anything should ever happen to me, I know they will be all right. They have the strength of true partnership. November 21st, I found a small vial in Sophie's makeup bag. I don't know what it is. I feel a chill that has nothing to do with the autumn air. I pray I am wrong. A family is not about blood alone. It is a bond of the soul. My only wish is to protect that bond. Tears fell onto the delicate pages. Even at the end, In the face of an unimaginable betrayal, her concern had been for everyone. She had been trying to hold her fracturing family together with the sheer force of her love. She loved Sophie, too, I whispered. Right to the end. Leo nodded, his own eyes wet. That was Mom. Her love had no conditions. The last entry, dated just 2 days before she died, was almost too painful to read. My greatest treasures are not in this house, but in the happy laughter I hear around my dining room table. That is the legacy I want to leave behind. A legacy of love that is strong enough to weather any storm. We sold the house. We couldn't stay. The memories were too beautiful and now too painful. The Spanish moss in the oaks seemed to weep, and the buttery yellow paint looked faded and sad. What about Asheville? Leo suggested one evening, as we looked at maps spread across our coffee table. The mountains. A new landscape. A fresh start. I agreed immediately. We needed the clean, crisp air of the mountains, a place to build a new life on the foundation of the lessons Eleanor had taught us. 3 months later, we moved into a small house nestled in a valley in the Blue Ridge Mountains. The first thing we did was hang Eleanor's photograph in the living room, a place of honor. And in the front yard, where a patch of sun fell just right, we planted a white camellia bush. We found new jobs, built new routines. I worked at a local college library, and Leo joined a small, environmentally focused architecture firm. We carried Eleanor's legacy with us, not as a burden of grief, but as a guiding principle. When a colleague at work was struggling, we offered help without hesitation. When I encountered a lonely student in the library, I took the time to listen. I learned that healthy boundaries are not walls to keep people out, but fences to protect the sacred garden of your own peace and well-being. I learned that self-respect means trusting your intuition, even when it tells you something you don't want to believe. And I learned that true family is a choice you make every day, a choice to protect, to nurture, and to love, sometimes at great cost. One crisp Sunday morning, we sat on our new porch, mugs of tea warming our hands, looking out at the mountains swathed in morning mist. The white camellia bush had its first bloom, a single, perfect flower, its petals like porcelain. She would have loved this view, Leo said quietly, putting his arm around me. She's here with us, I replied, leaning my head on his shoulder. She's in the way we trust each other. In the way we try to live with kindness. Her love didn't die, Leo. She gave it to us. The wind rustled through the tall pines, a sound like a gentle sigh. The pain of her loss had not disappeared, but it had changed. It was no longer a sharp, tearing agony, but a quiet, tender ache, a reminder of the depth of the love we had been so lucky to receive. We were survivors, Leo and I, scarred but not broken. We carried Eleanor's love within us, a steady, unflickering light guiding us forward, into the rest of our lives together.